Hi, everybody. Welcome back to, episode 8, exercise 8, the optional exercise for ERM, what is it, 4345, 4345? I can't remember. 4354, that's what it is. 4354. And we're just going to be basically going over this exercise, and actually, I'm going to show what is currently needed. So Dr. Miller made a little bit different version from the exercise instructions. What he's changed is the funded retention to 80%, as well as the loadings percentage is now 30 instead of 40. So with these changes, everything else is the same. So why don't we look at what is expected of us? We need to find the funded loss reserve, which is the retention. And then we need the surprise loss. We'll get to that later. The retention of risk, which means this number plus this number equals this one. Limit of risk transfer, of course, is your insurance limit of coverage, and expected cost of insurance risk transfer is the same as this portion right here. It's actually very similar to what we've been doing, and if we look at the instructions, not looking at the loadings and not looking at the 70%, we have the earnings per share is forecasted to be $3.60 per share, and there's 100 million shares in circulation right now. So, why don't we calculate the funded loss reserve? How do we find that? What number? If we went in class and we did a 70% version, so why don't we do the 80% version that's asked today? So, if you look at it, value at risk, this means this 5% is the top 5% worst case scenarios. So anything higher than 9.1 million and higher are the worst case scenarios of losses. And it only happens 5% of the time. So now if we're looking at a funded retention rate of 80%, that means 20% of those losses are going to be beyond our retention, our funded retention. So why don't we change it to that 20? Remember, 100 minus 80 equals 20. And you can see that it's gone down because remember, the other one was 5% of the worst cases and higher, but this is 20%. So we're lowering the standard. We're lowering it. So we can see that the funded retention, the funded loss reserve is this number. So why don't we type that out? I can't cell reference it because it kind of messes it up because that one's a formula. But 943 said we retain that amount of money. And why don't we not make it an accounting? Let's make it a number. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, let's make it a number. And so we're retaining, this is the self-funded loss reserve. But what about no more than 1% EPS? That's also known in this scenario as your surprise loss. We want no more than 1%. Well, we have $3.60 per share, right? And we have 100 million. Oop, where's the 100 million. I hope that's 100 million. Let's type the commas out. We're missing a zero. 100 million. So what do we do? 1% of 3.6 equals, actually, hold on. 1% times that times that. And that should be, I wish we should actually make this a number. Accounting, 3.6 million. Just showing the math. It's easier if I show the math. And why don't we make this number an accounting as well, just to visualize it. So we are having no more than 1% of EPS, and this is 1% of EPS. And it's also, that's called our surprise loss. So an additional buffer. We don't want any other losses exceeding 3.6 million. So if you look at, how do I want to show this? If I look at right here, let me bring it over. The maximum size of the funded loss reserve is this 7.095 million. And the maximum size of a surprise loss is negative It should actually be a negative 3.6 million, but it's not because this is math. And when we do the retention, it should be negative. You are allowing yourself to lose up to $3.6 million maximum. So, where did that go? It went somewhere. Let me open my Word. One moment. And so, yeah, that is our maximum loss. So, why don't we show? We need to now find the retention of risk transfer. So, this number plus that number. How do we do that? All we got to do is just take that number plus a negative, a negative. And that's our number right here. 10.7 million. In the direction that says the funded loss reserve should be rounded up to the nearest 100,000. The nearest 100,000 is 7.1 million. So if you did equals 7, negative 7.1 million, can't type, right? Yes, 7.1 million, and you did equals this plus negative that. It's practically the same. You could type in either one. If you want, type in this one. I typed in this one. I might change it. But basically, we now know the retention of risk transfer is 10.7 million. So why don't we type that in? I didn't type the 7. So we have the retention. So the limit of risk transfer. How do we figure that out? Well, we know that we're retaining 10.7 million. So why don't we take the 29 million, almost 30 million, and subtract 10.7 from it? Let's do that. Let's take negative 29, 874, 419, right? And subtract equals, take this minus that. Oh, I forgot to minus. And hold on. I added too many negative signs. That's the amount left. That's how much we need to be covered. This is the limit of coverage that we require, the minimum. So why don't we type that in? Negative 19, 174, 419. And you can see here the limit of risk transfer needed, and that's actually one of the bars. If you want, you can round up, and you can see here that my numbers are a little bit different. You can actually round up to 20 million if you wanted a round number. Maybe you can make it 19.5 million, or you can make it 19.2 million. It doesn't matter, but as long as you show, and actually, you know what? I'm going to change it to 174, 174,419. And I'm going to change this expected cost to 386, 365. And you can see here, I put through the 10.695. In the instructions, it says round up to the nearest 100,000. So why don't we change it to 700,000, right? And this number also needs to be changed to 100,000. Just like how we showed here. That number plus this one equals 10.7, and this is how much we need for limit of risk transfer, and this is the expected cost of insurance. I believe that's all that's needed on the document, and that's it. We found out what the size of the funded loss reserve was. It was right here, 7.1 million. We found out how much, no more than 1% earnings of earnings per share. And there was 100 million shares out there circulating, so 1% is 3.6 million. We found out how to calculate the what was it called? The value at risk, and we had 80% retention, funded retention, so that means 20% is outside of our funding, and that means anything higher than that. So we found it, we calculated it, insurance limit of coverage, 30% loading, and its expected cost of insurance or risk transfer. Remember, if there ever is a question on the test, how do you calculate loadings percentage? Well, we know that this is what the cost is of insurance with loadings added on. So if we just put a 0, you can see that there's a difference um, in loadings in the expected cost. That because this has no loadings on top of it. So if I add the 30 back, why don't we take this number? This has nothing to do with the assignment, by the way. So negative 386, 86, 3. I can't type right now, bro. 65, right? This is how much it was. We do the 0, and we do equals this minus that. You can see there's an $89,000, $90,000 difference in price because loadings was added. And this is the way you calculate how much loadings there was. 89,000, 90,000 means that is the loading cost. But with this is everything. This is the final price of buying insurance for $19 million limit. And that's the final price. So if you ever have a question like that on the final exam, it's very simple. Just plug in the 0 for loading percentage and watch the difference. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was quick and short. If you have any questions, write it in the comments or send me a text. And yeah, have a great rest of your week and year.